If we, as an industry, don't push this to the CPAs, to the employers, it's just not going to get there.
This is 401k Specialist Editor-in-Chief Brian Anderson, and this is the 401k Specialist Podcast. Today we're going to talk about a big avoidable problem, the fact that very few small businesses who start a retirement plan are actually taking advantage of the tax credit specifically meant to offset their costs for doing so. This is an issue that has provoked the ire of high-profile retirement plan advisor Will Hackler, who mentioned it to me at the Napa Summit down in Tampa earlier this spring, and we wanted to get his take on the issue and what can be done to fix the problem. Will, the Fix-It guy, is managing partner at Integrated Pension Services, where he focuses on 401k and pension plan design, compliance, and administration for corporations. He's also been recognized as a top advisor by Participant Outcomes by 401k Specialist and created the Integrated 401k, the system to align employee retirement plans with the company's broader wealth accumulation goals. Will, welcome back to the 401k Specialist Podcast.
Thanks for having me today, Brian. I appreciate it. Yes, and thank you for, grabbing you by the collar at Napa in Tampa, telling you we need to talk about this.
You brought up this issue of small businesses not taking advantage of the startup tax credit when we spoke down at Napa. I remember you being very passionate about it. Before we get into what can be done to fix the problem, can you start out by reminding us about the specifics of the tax credit, like who qualifies for it, how much it's worth, what Secure Act, Secure 2.0 did to enhance it?
Yep. So the IRS or Congress has given us a little bit of startup credit, actually started back in the early 2000s. The first, form for it, the first 8881 form, which I've been asking the industry about, like, do you know what the form is? And everybody gives me blank stares. But it's been around since 2002. Back then it was a small, $500, but you could get it for the first 3 years. And then with the first Secure Act, they expanded it. And at that time, you got the $500 credit, but you also got $250 per non-highly compensated, up to a maximum of $5,000. And that was for the first 3 years. Plus, they added on an additional tax credit of $500 for the auto enrollment at that point. And that was for anything, after 2019. What's interesting enough is that, they fixed the form in 2023. So for 2020 to 2023, you really didn't have the full version of the form available. Obviously, there's a lot of technical stuff going on with the first Secure Act, and then certainly the expansion with Secure 2.0, which then raised the level up to 100% of the cost, up to $5,000 for the first 3 years. And then the additional 100% credit on the first $1,000 for employer contributions for those who are eligible, and then declining for the next couple of years. What's interesting on the form too, Brian, in preparation for us talking here, one of the pieces that I had forgotten, but as looking at the form, even if you have 51 to 100 employees, you still get the credit. We talk a lot about it under 50 employees, but 51 to 100 is still there, but it's just 50% of that number. So there's still dollars that are there, certainly, that people are not taking advantage of.
Well, I know there's been some research out there showing that despite all these attractive incentives for starting a retirement plan, a very low percentage of eligible companies are actually filing to claim it. I think we talked about the Georgetown University Center for Retirement Initiatives found that fewer than 6% of eligible firms are claiming the credit. So what's the problem here? Why is the take-up rate so low? Are we dealing with an awareness problem, a complexity problem, or a combination?
Yeah, it's a little of both, Brian. And this is why I grabbed you in Tampa, right? Because we just finished the corporate filing season by the time we got together in the spring there. And what I found was no one was doing this. And I look at my own practice for it, because if employers were going to do this, we would have gotten phone calls of, how do you calculate this? Where do I get this credit number? And we had done some preparation to try to figure out the reports we needed to download for that, to get ready for it, to be asked those questions. And no one was asking us the questions. So, I think it's, we talk about it in the sales process. here's the credits you're available for, here's the things you should look for. But when it comes time for the employer to actually file for it, either they're not letting their CPA know, or the CPA has no idea where the form is, or they have no idea what the answers are. And you certainly, when you go to look at the form, there's 15 questions on there. The first one, qualified startup costs for it. Okay, that company might have that somehow coded in their software, or their file for filing their taxes, and the CPA might be able to see that. But then you go down the line of eligible employees. How are they calculating that eligible employees piece of it, especially with the CPA, if they don't know that? They don't know what the rule is for that step of it. Then the employer contribution piece of it, right? It's up to $1,000 per employee, but it's only for those employees that made less than $105,000 in the past year. So you go through those steps, those things need to be defined. Chances are they don't know those answers.
So what can be done? How can you help?
I think this is step number one. We talk about it, we get out there, jump up and down on the table, yelling about this piece of it because they're not getting the credit, right? The second piece of it is certainly having a conversation with the CPA, with the client, with the CPA, making sure that they understand what this piece of it is. So certainly as advisors, as third-party administrators, we have to be having the coordination with the CPA firm, making sure those things are done. Then the next big component to it, Brian, is our systems, right? Right now, our system, in order for us to get these answers for a client, we have to pull down 3 different reports, really 4, and then go through the math to figure out, where each one of those steps are to do it. So right now it's a manual process for us that we have to do this. So, our software providers, they also need to get on board here and help us create these pieces of it, because we can't be trying to do this for hundreds of clients every year. We've got to have an easier way to pull these things down. And that's one of the complaints to my software provider. A lot of these answers are in there. Why can't we get those pulled?
Right. So do you think, could these tax credits become a more powerful prospecting tool for advisors that are working in the small plan market?
I think it's a great prospecting tool, and I think a lot of the employers really appreciate that on the sales side, on the onboarding piece of it. But we've got to make sure we're doing the execution side of it when it comes to the filing process.
Now, if we're really at just about 6% of eligible firms claiming the credit, what do you think might be a realistic goal for that percentage within maybe the next 5 years if we do some of these things?
We got to get at least half. I know there's always going to be some that don't do it, right? You're going to get 20%, 30% of them that are not going to do it. But I think, certainly we've got to 10x this number here. It's just, to me, it's pitiful to see this.
Yeah, it's pretty staggering. I mean, that's why these tax credits were created in the first place, was to, spur more small businesses to offer plans. And if they're not taking advantage of it, it just doesn't make sense.
Exactly. And there's obviously, when we do our testing, we do our filings for the years, we're giving out the reporting piece of it, but they've got to go pull these numbers from there. So there's got to be that. There's certainly got to be help. We've got to come up with here's how to do the Form 8881 information. Because if we, as an industry, don't push this to the CPAs, to the employers, it's just not going to get there. There's just so much work that needs to be done. In other areas, this is one tiny thing, but hey, in the first 3 to 4 years, these are significant dollars for these employers.
Are you surprised that a lot of the CPAs out there and the certified tax preparers are not aware of this? Are they dropping the ball?
I certainly think there needs to be some awareness on it, but I wouldn't say, I think the blame, I'd push more of the blame towards us as advisors and administrators to be pushing it out and educating the CPA firms on these things. There's so much those CPA firms have to do for compliance. There was a quote a couple of years ago when I was on a group with a CPA firm. Just the cost of compliance now for the employer is so much money. It costs so much money for an employer to do these things, to hire a professional CPA firm, the number of forms that they have to do, the amount of forms that I have to do as a small business owner it's staggering how many are in there. This is just one of so many. And the CPA has to know, the one that's filing the form too, has to know that a new plan has been established, which is tough to grab in the first year or two.
Well, and then the other thing I remember we mentioned was even the small amount of firms that are taking advantage of this tax credit, they might do it for the first year, but then they're not following up and doing it for years 2 and 3.
Exactly. Maybe you get it into the first one, but because now the formula's changed, it's going to be changing a little bit, the next couple of years. Is it being done right, if at all?
Okay, well, Will Hackler, thanks so much for joining us today and providing this wake-up call on trying to fix this very preventable problem. Hope we can get the needle moved and a lot more small businesses taking advantage of these great incentives to provide a retirement plan.
Yeah, you have so many of these state mandated plans that are out there. So they're forcing the employer to do this. You're going to get a credit. Take that next step and actually apply for the credit by getting the form done. So we have an industry, we've got to come together to help with this problem.
All right. Well, thanks for putting the call out there, Will. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Brian.